It's April 2024, and I just want to do a video really bringing attention to men's issues, just awareness to them. Because in today's world, men's issues, men, are overlooked. And this video is inspired by a conversation that I had some time ago, and it ties in with subtopics that I've discussed over the past decade. For example, with social justice movements, specifically feminism. And we see, for example, how feminism has created an imbalance in society. And this imbalance, which you can say is a form of injustice, perhaps even tyranny. I want us to stop here for a moment. What is injustice? What is tyranny? From one perspective, they might be thinking that this is a good thing. On the other side of the table, it's a bad thing. Now, I'm not condoning social justice movements at all, but just thought I'd throw that in there just for something to think about. And we see this a lot, for example, in family courts, where feminism really dominates. And even in other courts, criminal courts and so forth, there's leniency and benefit of doubt and so forth given to women. Now, feminists would argue against that. But what feminism is really about, and I've said this before over the past decade, is the beta and omega type of females competing against the alpha females. Alpha females do not need feminism. They make their choices in life and very successful in life. Perhaps they even can choose who they decide to mate with for the rest of their life. It's not just feminism. We see this with the incel movement, where the beta and omega males are competing with the alpha males. And both these groups are crying for equality and all this other nonsense, going against the natural order of everything. We see, for example, with all these movements, basically it's just for special treatment. And certain groups are being elevated, at times artificially, maybe more times than not. I'll let you decide that. And we see this not only with these two topics, for example, but we see this on a plethora of other social, as a descriptive, issues, where everyone is crying victimization and rights and everything else. It's become so ridiculous that even someone's order of a cappuccino latte, whatever you want to call it, being wrong, and people are crying victim and going ballistic. I mean, there's tons of videos online showing these events, and it's just insanity. This is what the Western culture has become. People have been more focused about me, me, me. Western culture is spreading across the world. There are some cultures that are still adhering to their traditions, values, and social standards from their days of old, but the Western culture is still trying to creep in with these other cultures. There's not too many left. But we see going back to the family court, how liberal ideologies through feminism has created a bias against men. For example, I've discussed not too long ago the story of John Ramsey's and how his ex made no issue throughout the divorce proceedings and throughout other proceedings afterwards until it came to some visitation rights. His ex falsely accused him long after divorce proceedings were done, long after everything else, because his ex wanted him out of her life, not considering the child. That's a form of injustice, perhaps being enforced by the family courts, a form of tyranny. But I digress. And then she fabricated a story, and it cost him everything. And the courts just went along with it because, hey, that's the imbalance that's been created through feminism, especially in family courts. I've mentioned a guy by the name of Andy, who hasn't seen his daughter in years as well, and he misses her. And both these men, in these two examples alone, and there's countless of others, want to be part of their children's lives. Just because the family courts, for example, are defaulting giving custody to the woman, whether they're capable or mentally stable enough to care for a child, that's a whole different topic. Doesn't mean that these women should have custody. There could be serious mental health issues, and that child will grow up being tormented by the mother. And a lot of times we see the mother only wanting custody because it goes against the father. No one questions if they should have custody, just by default. But the family courts don't really care. But where this inspiration comes from, this conversation with this man, he had to raise his children alone, a single father. And no one gives credit to single fathers. And the mother decided one day, didn't want anything to do with it, and just gone for many, many, many years. And this single father had to sacrifice his career to raise the children, but no one ever stops to think, well, what about single fathers? It's hard on them as well, and they have to wear various different caps to support their children and be a parent and compensate for the parent that's not there. In the end, from what I understand, the children turned out very good. But it was hard on him. He had to raise them alone. And I remember seeing the pain in his eyes, his facial expressions when he was going back in his memories, telling the story. And everything I guess he had to go through to be successful at raising the children alone. We only hear about in society single mothers, but single fathers tend to be overlooked. And historically, men haven't had it easy. But the feminist narrative would have many people, especially women, moreover, young women, think differently. And it's interesting when you look at young people today, whether it be male or female, how their only knowledge base comes from, say, a teacher or even a professor with extreme liberal ideologies, and these young people don't know any better. They think they do. This whole imbalance just between the two sexes has not benefited society, civilization. It's part of what's causing or has caused civilization to fall. We are in the late stage of the last age of civilization, the age of decadence, again, and we repeat history because history is forgotten either by chance or design. And we see through feminism where there's even absolute disdain, hatred towards men, where women are even being asked, are men needed? And they're saying, no, we don't need men. Just go through all the talking points against the conservative type and can't support anything that they're saying. They can't support their position. Then they get into name calling and being dismissive and everything else. They don't realize that what they, as a descriptive, believe in is very shallow. It's based on nonsense, lies, misinformation, disinformation. And that should be a red flag to anyone on any topic, is if you can't support your position to any depth, then maybe you need to re-examine your position, forgetting that their successes, for example, when they're single with children, they're having to rely still on society. And who built society, who maintains the infrastructures and everything? Men. But this is how far we've devolved through social conditioning, social engineering, brainwashing, if you want to put it in the most simplest terms. A lot of the men issues today stem from feminism. It's been very unfair to men. So I just really want to bring awareness to men's issues. Homelessness. Far more men are homeless. And people assume that someone's homeless because, well, they're on drugs and alcohol. Well, no. They might resort to that at some point while being homeless just to try to cope, but that's not why they're there. Yeah, there are some examples where, yeah, homeless people are there because of their own doing, but most of the time it's because they've fallen through the cracks of the system. And when you look at, for example, the rates of, I'm trying to wordcraft this, people taking themselves out of life, far higher with men than with women. Men's issues are real. I've discussed the invisible foe over the years. That's a big part of it, the invisible foe. Something that's impacting their lives, but it's not anything tangible, and trying to cope with it and cope with the stresses of, for example, being a male and the expectations. That's really what my point is with this video, is just bringing awareness to men's issues, because there's very little resources for men, although on its appearance there may seem that there are some, but there's really none. There's a plethora for women. But just remember all the single fathers out there raising their children and doing a very good job. Remember all the fathers who want to be a part of their children's lives but can't because of the invisible foe of law saying that they can't. You really have to question the women that don't want the father to be part of their child's life. Just bringing some awareness to the topic of men's issues. And you look back into the days of old, people didn't get divorced because they knew nothing lasts forever, the good times and the bad times. And when the bad times are over, then it'll be good times again. They learned to resolve issues. We don't see that across the board in society at all anymore. People can't resolve their own issues. People want to call some authority to say, hey, I got a problem. Let me call them over the stupidest things. But I digress. Just remember the men who built society and all the comforts, real or perceived, by men. And I'm just going to finish off by saying this is not to say that women don't play a role. No. We need a balance. That balance is long gone. Anyway, hopefully something to think about. Again, remember the men out there. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.